Formula One has never been won by a newcomer, not once in the hybrid era. Every manufacturer that arrived with fresh money, fresh engineers and a fresh mandate left without a title. Audi knows this. They came anyway. On March 8, 2026, Audi rolled onto the Formula One grid for the first time. Not as a sponsor, not as an engine supplier quietly bolted to someone else's chassis, as a full factory team, with their own power unit, their own drivers, and a stated target of winning a world championship by 2030. The question isn't whether Audi is good enough for Formula One. The question is whether Formula One is structured to let them prove it. This video is about a structural problem that most F1 coverage doesn't address. It's not about lap times or liveries or driver lineups. It's about whether the architecture of Formula One itself, the regulations, the politics, the institutional knowledge gap, makes it functionally impossible for a new constructor to arrive and genuinely compete within a reasonable timeframe. My conclusion is that Audi will not win a championship before 2031, and the reason has almost nothing to do with their engine. Audi has done almost everything right on paper. The real question is whether the paper matters when the game is being played in a room you've never been in before. To understand why 2026 was the specific window Audi chose, you have to understand what changed this year at a technical level, because it genuinely matters. Formula One has run on the same fundamental power unit architecture since 2014, a 1.6-litre turbocharged V6, hybridized with two motor generator units, the MGUK, which recovers kinetic energy under braking, and the MGUH, which harvests heat energy from the turbocharger and uses it to prevent turbo lag. The MGUH was, by any measure, one of the most complex pieces of engineering in motorsport history. Think of the MGUH like a proprietary operating system that only Mercedes truly understood. They'd been writing code for it since 2014. Ferrari and Renault were running patched versions. Everyone else was guessing. When the FIA deleted it from the rulebook for 2026, they didn't just change a component, they wiped the hard drive. 12 years of institutional knowledge gone. Every manufacturer resets to the same blank screen, and the change doesn't stop there. The MGUK, the kinetic recovery unit, has been upgraded from 120 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts for 2026, creating a roughly 50-50 split between the internal combustion engine and electrical power output. This is a fundamentally different kind of power unit, not an evolution, a replacement. These regulations are scheduled to run for 5 seasons. Being quick from the outset sets a team up to be competitive for years. That's the window Audi identified. That's why they entered now rather than 5 years ago. On paper, it's an intelligent strategic decision. The problem, as always, is what happens when paper meets pavement. Nico Hülkenberg, a driver with 251 Grand Prix starts, no podiums, and exactly the kind of clear-eyed realism that comes from spending a career in the midfield, chose his words carefully when asked about Audi's competitiveness in the build-up to the season opener. "I think we're not a million miles away from what I can gauge midfield-wise," he said, "but it's always hard to tell. I know there's a long road ahead, a lot of work still ahead of us." Read between the lines. A driver of Hülkenberg's experience doesn't accidentally describe the midfield as the ceiling. That's a managed statement, delivered by someone who knows exactly what he's telling you while appearing to say very little. Midfield is not a floor being raised, it's the lid. The team that Audi inherited, Sauber, finished 9th in the 2025 Constructors' Championship. That's not a disaster, but it's also the baseline Audi is building from. 9th out of 10. Not a platform, a renovation project. Then there's the leadership situation. Mattia Binotto, former Ferrari team principal, was brought in as head of the Audi F1 project. Jonathan Wheatley, poached from Red Bull Racing after 2 decades as their sporting director, was appointed team principal. Wheatley then departed with immediate effect for personal reasons before the season began, leaving Binotto to absorb both roles at the exact moment Audi needed clarity of command most. That's not a minor organizational footnote. Losing a team principal before your first race represents structural instability at precisely the level where Formula One teams live or die. This matters because Formula One is not won by machinery alone. It's won by decision-making under pressure, at race pace, with imperfect information, hundreds of times per season. That decision-making culture takes years to build, and it starts at the top. Toyota arrived in Formula One in 2002 with a larger budget than any team in the paddock. They built their own engine, their own chassis, their own wind tunnel, their own campus. They ran until 2009. They never won a single Grand Prix. BMW returned as a full manufacturer in 2006, won one race, Robert Kubica at the 2008 Canadian Grand Prix, a result so anomalous it still gets cited as an exception, and departed the following year, after a boardroom review concluded the return on investment didn't justify the commitment. Honda, in their manufacturer stint of the early 2000s, spent 3 seasons becoming genuinely competitive, and then withdrew within 4 years of their only championship. The pattern across every manufacturer exit isn't incompetence. It's that Formula One has an institutional knowledge base in aerodynamics, in race strategy, in power unit integration, in the unwritten political dynamics of the paddock that cannot be purchased on a timeline that satisfies a corporate board. Boardrooms think in 4-year cycles. Formula One compounds knowledge over decades. But here's what those failure stories share that almost nobody talks about. Those manufacturers didn't just run out of patience. They ran into a system that was quietly, consistently working against them. And that system is still running. There is a dimension to this that rarely gets discussed outside the paddock. The Concord Agreement, the commercial contract that governs how teams participate in Formula One, creates financial structures that reward longevity. Teams with deeper historical participation receive larger baseline payments from Formula One's commercial rights holder. Ferrari receives unique bonuses written into the agreement entirely, a direct acknowledgement that their brand is worth more to the sport than competitive parity. The cost cap, introduced in 2021 and broadly presented as a levelling mechanism, actually creates a specific asymmetry for new entrants. The established teams already have their infrastructure in place. The wind tunnel data, the simulation history, the supplier relationships, the institutional knowledge of every circuit on the calendar in every weather condition. The cost cap limits how fast a new team can build those assets from scratch. Legacy teams are defending positions built before the cap existed. Behind a wall, the cap itself prevents newcomers from scaling at pace. Audi has been transparent about this dynamic in their own way. Their official roadmap states that from 2030, they expect to be in a position to compete for world championship titles. That's not ambition masquerading as confidence, it's an honest acknowledgement that 4 years of competitive development is the minimum viable timeline. What it also reveals is that Audi does not expect to challenge in the near term. They are buying time and infrastructure simultaneously, and the real test of whether they survive long enough to reach that window is whether corporate patience outlasts the political headwinds. The 2026 regulations represent something larger than one manufacturer's entry. Formula One now has 5 power unit manufacturers: Mercedes, Ferrari, Honda, Red Bull, Ford, and Audi. And the removal of the MGUH was specifically designed to attract new builders by reducing the complexity barrier. Cadillac has also joined the grid this season as the 11th constructor, using Ferrari power. The sport is genuinely expanding its constructor base for the first time in a generation. If Audi performs competitively through 2027 and 2028, they validate the model. They become the proof that the 2026 reset actually worked, that the sport's gatekeeping isn't impenetrable, that regulations can genuinely level a field built on decades of embedded advantage. That outcome would accelerate further manufacturer interest and reshape the commercial architecture of the sport. If they struggle, if the power unit falls behind, if Binotto cannot stabilize the operation without a dedicated team principal, if Sauber's midfield ceiling proves to be structural rather than temporary, then the lesson calcifies. And the lesson is the same one Toyota learned, the same one BMW learned. Formula One does not care how much money you have. It cares how long you have been paying attention. Audi has done something no manufacturer has managed to do since the hybrid era began. They chose their entry point with genuine technical intelligence rather than hubris. The 2026 reset is real. The MGU-H's removal is a genuine equalizer. The Sauber acquisition gave them a foundation that Toyota never had, and the 50-50 power split gives their road car engineering expertise a relevance to F1 performance that simply didn't exist before this season. Audi's 2030 championship window is 4 seasons away. The real question is whether that window survives contact with the boardroom when results don't come immediately. History suggests that is always where the system wins. Because manufacturers don't fail in Formula One because they weren't good enough, they fail because corporate patience has a shorter half-life than a Formula One championship cycle. Audi has the money, the regulations, and the window. What they cannot manufacture is time, and time is the only currency Formula One has ever respected.